Madam Speaker.
There will now be a moment of silent prayer and meditation. May we be seated. Order, honorable members. Today we meet here in a joint sitting between the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. I'd like to welcome the chairperson of the NCOP and all the members of the NCOP to this dome. The purpose for our joint sitting is to deal with the celebration and the commemoration of Africa Day within the context of our own constitution. I will now ask the secretary to read the order of the day.
Debate on the 30th anniversary commemoration of the Constitution.
Thank you very much. I will now ask Honorable Nell to come and address the House.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. Today we commemorate one of the most significant milestones in our history, the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa in 1996. We do so under the theme, One Constitution, One Nation. Reflect, renew, recommit. It is both a celebration as well as a call to action. I had the privilege of serving as a member of the Constitutional Assembly that drafted and adopted our Constitution between 1994 and 1996. Our Constitution did not emerge from nowhere, nor was it imposed upon the people of South Africa from elsewhere. It was the product of a protracted struggle against colonialism and apartheid. It carries within its provisions the aspirations of generations of South Africans who fought for freedom, equality and human dignity. We remember those who were imprisoned, those who were exiled, those who were tortured, those who lost their lives, and all of those who refused to accept that injustice and oppression should define their being. The Constitution is not merely a legal text. It is a product of struggle, of sacrifice, and of hope. The values that ultimately found expression in the Constitution did not begin in the Constitutional Assembly. Despite being forged in the furnace of negotiations between those forces representing a dying and decaying apartheid past and those representing a democratic and progressive future, the Constitution emerged true to its ancestry. The Bill of Rights adopted by the ANC in 1923, the African Claims adopted by the ANC in 1943, the Freedom Charter adopted in 1955, and the Women's Charter adopted in 1954. These represent the ancestry of our Constitution. Our Constitution is a revolutionary and transformative document. It is the supreme law of the land, the basis for the transformation of our society into a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic state founded on the values of human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms. Only be truly realized through the fundamental transformation of our society, a monumental historic project requiring a democratic developmental state acting in concert with all sectors of society. Transformation is mandated by the Constitution and driven and guided by the Constitution. The Constitution is not designed to obstruct transformation, but to advance it. We are all duty-bound continuously and critically to assess the progress we are making in discharging this mandate. The Constitution begins with the words, "We the people of South Africa." These words remind us that the Constitution belongs to the people. It is not the property of government. It is not the property of Parliament. It is not the property of lawyers and judges. It is the collective covenant of the people of South Africa. It is, as has often been said, the birth certificate of our democratic nation. It defines who we are and who we aspire to become. The Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic. Every law, every policy, and every exercise of public power must be consistent with it. No person and no institution stands above it. This principle of constitutional supremacy represented a decisive break with our past. Under apartheid, Parliament could pass unjust laws that violated fundamental human rights. We do not want to go back there. Today, all public power is constrained by the Constitution and subject to constitutional scrutiny. The Constitution creates a democratic state consisting of three co-equal branches that have distinct but interdependent roles to play in transforming society. The legislature exercises its legislative authority by passing laws which must progressively advance transformation of the state and society. The executive is responsible for the implementation of laws and the development of policies geared towards the transformation of society. The courts exercise judicial authority by interpreting the laws passed by the legislature and action taken by the executive in accordance with the Constitution. At the heart of our constitutional order is a simple but profound principle. All are equal before the law, regardless of race, gender, language, religion, social status, sexual orientation, or political affiliation. Every person enjoys equal protection and equal benefit of the law. It reflects our determination that never again shall South Africa be a country in which some are more human than others. The preamble sets out the kind of South Africa we seek to build. It calls upon us to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. It calls upon us to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. It calls upon us to build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. This constitutes a revolutionary program of fundamental social and economic transformation. For 30 years, the Constitution has provided the framework through which South Africa has pursued this transformation. It has anchored democratic governance, it has established independent courts and institutions, it has expanded access to housing, healthcare, education, water, electricity, and social protection. It has helped to improve the lives of millions of South Africans. But as we reflect honestly on these 30 years, we must acknowledge that whilst we are not where we were, neither are we where we need to be. Our democracy has achieved much, but much remains to be done. Poverty, unemployment, and inequality continue to deny millions of South Africans the full enjoyment of their freedom. Crime and violence undermine safety and social cohesion. Corruption deprives us of the resources needed to implement provisions of our Constitution. Gender-based violence continues to violate the rights and dignity of women and children. Too many young people remain excluded from education, skills development, and meaningful work. The Constitution provides neither excuses nor guarantees. It provides a framework for united action. It places obligations on government, institutions, and citizens alike. It requires us to continue working to dismantle the legacies of colonialism, apartheid, and patriarchy. It requires us to build a democratic and developmental state capable of meeting the needs of our people. It requires us to build an economy that is more inclusive, more dynamic, and more capable of creating opportunities for all. As we renew our commitment to the Constitution, we must also defend it. Across the world, democratic values are under assault. Values such as equality, inclusion, non-racialism, non-sexism, and human solidarity are increasingly being challenged. We see attempts to spread division, misinformation, and intolerance. We see attacks on democratic institutions and the rule of law. We must never take our constitutional democracy for granted. This demands that we build the broadest united front to defend, consolidate, and advance our constitutional democracy and status as a sovereign country in the family of nations. The Constitution survives not because it is written on paper, but because citizens believe in it, defend it, and give life to it through their action. That is why active citizenship remains essential. The Constitution establishes both representative and participatory democracy. Citizens do not participate only once every few years when elections take place. Democracy requires ongoing engagement by the people. It requires citizens who organize, participate, hold institutions accountable, and contribute to the development of their community. It requires citizens who recognize both their rights and responsibility. This year provides an important opportunity to put these principles into practice. On the 4th of November 2026, South Africans will participate in our 7th democratic local government election. These elections matter because local government is the sphere where the Constitution is finds most direct expression in the lives of the people. The right to vote is amongst the most important rights secured by our Constitution. We encourage all eligible South Africans, especially young South Africans, to register to vote and to ensure that their registration details are up to date and to use the voter registration weekend on the 20th and the 21st of June to do so. The future of our constitutional democracy belongs to you. Your generation will shape the next 30 years of our constitutional journey. Your vote matters. Let us recommit ourselves to building a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. One constitution, one nation. Reflect, renew, recommit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nel. Honorable Nkosi. Honorable Nkosi, is your maiden speech, and I'm sure they shared with you the rules of the maiden speech. Thank you very much.
Honorable Speaker, members of the National Assembly, our traditional leaders in communities, Ondabezita, fellow South Africans, and a special greetings to the youth of this country at the start of Youth Month. Today we gather to commemorate 30 years of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. I stand here today in respect of the blood, sweat, and tears of those who fought against apartheid so that every South African could enjoy human dignity, equality, and freedom, but also with the realization that the Constitution was a compromise. We are told our Constitution stands as one of the most progressive legal frameworks in the world, yet no country in the world copies it. Today, as young people, we are forced to ask an uncomfortable question. Has the promises of Constitution become the lived reality for the majority of Black South Africans? 30 years later, can a child in Sharpeville, Khayelitsha, Umlazi, Mdantsane, Alexandra, Buchabelo, Giani truly say they enjoy the same opportunities as a child born in Sandton, Constantia, and Umhlanga? Constitutions must not only be judged by what they promise, but also by what people experience. The Constitution gave the African majority the right to vote, but it did not change the ownership of the economy. 30 years later, South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, with a Gini coefficient of 0.63, where more than 67% of the population is living in the upper bound of the poverty line, meaning roughly 2/3 of South Africans live below the income needed to afford basic basic monthly needs. Millions of young people remain excluded from meaningful economic participation, where 6 in a group of 10 are unemployed. Today, nearly half of South Africa's working age population is under the age of 35, yet youth unemployment remains at crisis levels. 30 years into democracy, the greatest predator of poverty in South Africa is still where you're born, what school you attend, and whether your family possesses economic power. Umuntu omnyama uzalelwa ehluphekeni aphinde afele khona. Millions are forced to survive in informal settlements without proper sanitation, stacked up in matchbox houses, bengenawo ngisho ugesi. Thousands of graduates walk our streets carrying qualifications that cannot secure employment. Ithemba lemindeni eminingi edele konke ithumela abantwana esikolweni ishabalele. Abaningi are on the streets badla inyawo. Township and rural schools still lack libraries, laboratories, adequate infrastructure, and modern technology. The dream of free education, as pronounced by His Excellency President Jacob Zuma, ignored in this very house. This is not a mere policy failure, it's a moral crisis. As young people, we refuse the politics of pretending and reject a constitution that has failed to change the lives of ordinary South Africans. We cannot speak about rights without speaking about material conditions. The struggle of our generation is different from that of 1976. The youth of 76 fought against political exclusion. The youth of 2026 fight against economic exclusion. The enemies confronting today's unemployment, its poverty, inequality, hopelessness, substance abuse, crime, and hunger. Honorable members, political freedom without economic freedom remains incomplete. This constitutional democracy has produced millions of economic spectators, and we cannot, as true South Africans, consider it the best in the world when it's failed to help us to meaningfully transform. A constitution that protects the property rights but hinders land ownership for the majority is fraud. The constitution protects those who benefited from apartheid but struggles to guarantee meaningful economic inclusion for those who were victims. This constitution will inevitably face growing scrutiny from the poor and the marginalized. You know why? Because South Africans are not stupid. As a young South African who's in touch with reality, who's experienced and seen inequality, I stand here boldly today to say that the Constitution has failed to protect the rights of millions of black South Africans who remain disadvantaged by virtue of their skin color. Honorable members, if we are honest about gathering in this house, honest to South Africans, as we commemorate 30 years of constitutional democracy, we must have the courage to discuss the limitations of the constitutional settlement itself. The MK Party rejects the notion that constitution is beyond criticism. No constitutional order should be immune to scrutiny. One of the greatest weaknesses of the constitutional settlement is its treatment of the land question. The MK Party continues to advocate for constitutional reform and a framework that recognizes the full history of dispossession. Honorable Speaker, we must also confront another uncomfortable truth. Long before colonialism, African societies governed themselves. Sasinomthetho, functioning legal systems, systems of justice, systems of land administration and governance. The Constitution confines us within the Roman Dutch law and English legal traditions. African law is often treated as an exception requiring validation. This raises fundamental questions. Can genuine decolonization occur when indigenous African legal systems remain subordinate in their own country? The MK Party believes that the constitutional reform must include the restoration of dignity, status, and authority of indigenous African systems of governance and customary law. Honorable members, education remains one of the most important instruments of liberation. Education is not a privilege, it's an investment. The greatest victims of these constitutional failures are the youth. We need radical youth economic empowerment, not slogans, not revolving door employment opportunities that expire after 12 months, real economic participation. Government procurement must prioritize women and youth-owned businesses. Municipalities must become incubators for local entrepreneurship. The state must support industrialization and manufacturing so that South Africa produces more and imports less. Furthermore, we must rebuild township economies. Our townships cannot remain consumer zones only. They must become production zones. Spaza shops, salons, shoemakers, car washes, and chitanyamas must be kept as businesses for locals and must be supported through infrastructure, finance, and market access. Honorable members, if we're serious about serving the nation and living up to the so-called compromise document, we must start by declaring war on corruption, and that starts by addressing the issue of Ramadola. Every rand stolen from a public purse is stolen from a classroom, a clinic, a bursary, and a young person seeking work. Corruption is not merely a governance problem, it is a violence against the poor. Madam Speaker, this House must revisit how socio-economic rights are implemented. Rights cannot exist only on paper. Constitutions do not transform societies. Leadership, political courage, and economic justice does. The realities experienced in township streets, rural villages, informal settlements, and the working class communities tell us so. The generation of Tambo, Sisulu, Hani, President Zuma, and countless others gave us political democracy. The responsibility of our generation is to deliver economic justice. The MK Party will use Parliament as a tool to complete the work of transformation, and we will start by challenging parts of this very constitution. Ngoba nina so-called GNU senhlulekile, umkhonto uzosala uzenzela. Umkhonto wesizwe party is here to challenge the status quo, and we will be a generation that restores the dignity of the poor, opens up opportunity to the youth and bring back hope to our beautiful nation. The MK Party has brought on the fight for constitutional amendments. Section 25 will be amended. Black people will get their land back. Bathanda bangathandi. The black child will receive free quality education. Law and order will be restored, and illegal immigrants will leave this country. Vote MK Party on the 4th of November 2026. Asidlalila. Wazamkhona.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable G. Breitenbach. Should I say maiden speech as the Chief Whip?
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Members, today we commemorate one of the greatest achievements in our nation's history, the adoption of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Our Constitution is more than a legal document. It is a solemn covenant between the people and the state. It represents the embodiment of hopes and sacrifices of millions who struggled against oppression, injustice and inequality. It forms the foundation upon which our democracy rests, and it is the expression of our collective commitment to human dignity, equality, freedom and the rule of law. When we adopted this Constitution, we did so with a profound understanding of our painful past. We sought not merely to replace one system of government with another. We sought to establish a society founded upon justice, accountability and respect for the inherent worth of every human being. Our Constitution promises every person the right to life. It promises freedom and security. It promises dignity. It promises equality before the law, and that government shall be accountable and responsive. Yet as we commemorate our Constitution today, we must confront an uncomfortable truth. For millions of South Africans, these constitutional promises remain promises only. The constitutional dream promised to South Africans 30 years ago has not been kept and is increasingly overshadowed by the scourge of crime. The greatest threat to our constitutional democracy is not the existence of crime itself. It is the gradual erosion of public confidence in the state's capability of protecting its citizens from crime. Every day, ordinary South Africans wake up behind thick security bars. They drive in fear of hijackings. They worry about whether their children will return home safely from school. Businesses spent billions on private security. They can no longer believe that public safety is guaranteed. We are forced to build walls to keep us safe when we could be building bridges to unite this beautiful country. Communities across our country are terrorized by violent gangs, organized criminal networks, extortion syndicates and drug trafficking. Women continue to face sickening levels of gender-based violence. Farmers and rural communities live under constant threat. Urban communities are plagued by robbery, murder and intimidation. As long as citizens live in fear, constitutional rights will remain theoretical. The right to dignity is diminished when victims of crime are left traumatized and unsupported. The right to property becomes hollow when criminal syndicates operate with impunity. And the right to life is rendered meaningless for the thousands of South Africans murdered each year. Honourable Members, the Constitution imposes obligations not only upon the citizen, but also upon the state. Section 205 of the Constitution makes it clear that the object of the police service is to protect, combat and investigate crime, to maintain public order, to protect and secure the inhabitants of the Republic and their property, and to uphold and enforce the law. This is a constitutional imperative. Likewise, the NPA carries the constitutional responsibility of prosecuting criminals without fear, favour or prejudice. Our courts carry the responsibility of administering justice fairly and impartially. The entire criminal justice system exists to give practical effect to the constitutional rights. When these institutions fail, constitutional rights suffer. When criminal investigations collapse due to incompetence or lack of resources, constitutional rights suffer. When prosecutions are delayed for years, constitutional rights suffer. When the justice system fails survivors, constitutional rights suffer. That is why the fight against crime is a constitutional imperative. Crime is not merely a policing issue. It's not merely a justice issue. It is most definitely a constitutional issue. Every successful criminal prosecution strengthens the rule of law. Every criminal syndicate dismantled reinforces the belief in the state's ability to protect its citizens. Every community freed from gangsters advances the constitutional promise of freedom and dignity. Every corrupt official removed from office restores public trust in democratic institutions. We must recognize that organized crime and corruption represent a particularly dangerous threat to constitutional governance. It weakens institutions, it undermines accountability, it creates a culture of impunity, and ultimately it robs the poorest and most vulnerable South Africans of the opportunities and the protections that the Constitution seeks to guarantee. The framers of our Constitution understood that the abuse of power poses a great danger to democracy. That is why they created a system founded upon accountability, transparency, and the separation of powers. The rule of law remains our most powerful weapon against corruption and criminality. No individual should be above the law. The Constitution demands equal justice for all, irrespective of who you are, where you live, or whether or not you are politically connected. Honourable Speaker, despite the challenges we face, there remains much reason for hope. The Constitution has demonstrated remarkable resilience over the past 3 decades. Our courts continue to uphold Constitution. Civil society continues to defend constitutional values. Our democratic institutions continue to function and will undoubtedly punish those responsible for bad governance in the next election. 68 million South Africans continue to believe in the promise of a society governed by law rather than fear. We are a nation united by a collective hope for a better future. But hope alone is not enough, and the commemoration of the Constitution must be more than a ceremonial exercise. It must serve as a call to action to clean up the South African police service, to rebuild the capacity of the National Prosecuting Authority, and to ensure that our courts are adequately resourced so that they can convict criminals. A call to combat corruption wherever it exists. A call to place the safety and security of South Africans at the centre of government priority. Most importantly, it must be a call to restore public confidence that the state remains capable of protecting its citizens and enforcing the law. Because constitutional rights are only meaningful when they can be enjoyed in practice. The ultimate measure of our constitutional democracy is not the eloquence of our legal principles, but whether ordinary South Africans can live free from fear, pursue opportunities and trust that justice will prevail. We must ensure that future generations inherit a South Africa where the rule of law prevails over criminality, where justice triumphs over impunity, and where the promises of our constitution are experienced not merely in theory, but in the daily lives of all of our people. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Ashley Tape.
Speaker, we are having this debate exactly 148 years since the death of King Sandile Kancika Mngolombane in 1878. Mngolombane died during the War of Mqayetibi, which was the 9th and last war of dispossession between Amaxhosa and the European settlers in this territory. This death and that war also marked the end of 100 years of continuous bloody wars against land dispossession led by our people in what we now call the Eastern Cape. The fight was to keep their land and therefore their sovereignty. For that, thousands were condemned to death by shrapnels and bullets of the European settlers, while others like Chief Makhoma were condemned to die in the Robben Island. Their quest, which remains our quest today, was to fight against European domination so that we as African people could retain the call to call our souls our own. The fight was never to share Cook sisters and some vague notion of brotherhood with the settler. This celebration of the Constitution must be viewed from this perspective. The 8th of May 1996 marked a significant moment in the country's history. The Constitutional Assembly formally adopted the final version of the South African Constitution, which was then later to be ascended by the President Mandela in December that year. The adoption of the Constitution was a high watermark in the history of this country. It brought to an end centuries of forced and then legislated oppression and exploitation of African people by a marauding gang of racist invaders. It marked the end of formalized discrimination, recognized the full humanity of African people, affirmed the rights of everyone not to be discriminated on the basis of race, sex, gender, or creed. It provided for the recognition of some fundamental and non-derogable rights, such as the right to life, the right to equality, the right to human dignity, and protections against slavery and forced labor. Coming from centuries of racist dehumanization, exploitation, and oppression, the adoption of the Constitution was a significant step in our quest for freedom. But it was not sufficient. It left that which Mngolombane died for still in the hands of the settlers. Despite Section 26 of the Constitution providing that everyone has a right to housing, the reality is that the housing backlog in 1996 was approximately 1.5 million houses. And today, we sit with the housing backlog of over 2.5 million houses. While we have made progress in the provisions of water and electricity, the reality of the matter is that most of the water taps in villages and taps are still without water. As the provision of water would disturb the mafia groupings that have now firmly entrenched themselves as water tanker providers in this country. Honorable Speaker, our incapacity to maintain water infrastructure, to maintain and improve roads, to ensure that provision for universal quality healthcare has been systematically eroded over the past 80 years. While most of these problems are not rooted in the Constitution itself, but in the lethargic nature of our government, they are tied right at the hip of our evolution as the constitutional democracy. Perhaps the most insidious provision of the Constitution is that relating to redress of historical injustices, primarily the recognition that South Africa is an occupied territory, built on the back of massive land dispossession and the emancipation of African people. Section 25 of the Constitution creates a false separation between the rights of the settler and the rights of the natives, between the rights of the dispossessor and the rights of the dispossessed, the rights of the landed gentry and the rights of the millions of landless people in this very land. The provision of land reform in that section are merely a farce because they are premised of the faulty constitutional principle that the settler has as much right as the right of the native. The requirement to pay compensation to the settler in order to redistribute land back to the rightful owner is an insult to Mngolombane and many of those who fought for emancipation. Today, the native still owns about 4% of all privately owned land in this country, while the settler owns over just 72%. This is deeply embedded in this Constitution, and it must be done away with. The resolution of the land question is the most fundamental question this settler colony would have to deal with, and it can no longer be afforded to pussyfoot around it. At this point, only the EFF is bold and daring enough to decisively bring an answer to this particular question. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Khatebe.
Madam Speaker, South Africa is privileged to have one of the most forward-thinking, inclusive and innovative constitutions in the world. This document represents a hard-won victory for our nation. It is the result of decades of negotiations and sacrifice and remains the cornerstone of our democracy. While we celebrate the immense progress our constitution has brought us over the last 30 years, we must also uphold our duty of ensuring that it prioritizes South African citizens. To enforce its terms effectively, we must strengthen efforts to reinforce our porous borders and return unlawful migrants to their home countries. The IFP remains committed to upholding the integrity of the Constitution, given that its creation is intertwined with our party's history. It was the IFP who secured the inclusion of a Bill of Rights, which guarantees the essential freedoms of all South Africans. It preserves our rights to dignity, equality, freedom of speech, peaceful assembly and demonstrations and beyond. Given our founding role in establishing these rights, the IFP remains dedicated to ensuring that they are protected. One of the most forward-thinking aspects of our constitution is its commitment to preserving the rich heritage of South Africa's traditional leadership. The IFP played a fundamental role in advocating for the validity of traditional leaders and making sure that their rights were enshrined in the governing document of our nation. Under the leadership of our founder, the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, our party negotiated for the recognition of customary and indigenous law. 30 years later, we maintain this commitment to protecting the living cultural heritage of our country by advocating for the rights of traditional leaders. Although the IFP played a fundamental role in shaping the constitution, we emphasize the importance of amending it to fit the shifting complexities of our country. In doing so, we guarantee that it fulfills the ultimate purpose of saving South African citizens. We must remind ourselves that the constitution is a living document. It is not intended to remain static, but must be brought to life through debate and discussion. Being able to do so is a sign of a healthy democracy. In light of this, we highlight the need to amend Chapter 12, which outlines the boundaries of traditional leadership. We advocate for the importance of updating this chapter in order to clearly define the powers and roles that our nation's traditional leaders are entitled to. Similarly, to ensure that power resides in the hands of the people, we must allow more federal practices to grant provinces sufficient independence. Ultimately, it is our duty as legislators and South Africans to protect the integrity of our constitution. This commemoration is a valuable reminder that it cannot be treated as a theoretical set of guidelines. The IFP maintains our long-standing commitment to ensuring that the constitution protects all South African citizens equitably. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Van Zyl.
Speaker, honorable members, South Africans, and allow me also to greet our incoming President of the Republic in 2029, President Mackenzie. Today, we mark a significant milestone in the history of our democracy, the 30th anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. 30 years ago, South Africa made a solemn commitment to itself that never again will South Africans be divided by oppression, denied dignity, or excluded from opportunities because of who they are. Our Constitution became the foundation of that promise, a promise of freedom, equality, justice, and human dignity for all. As the PA, we proudly recognize our Constitution as one of the greatest achievements of a democratic South Africa. It's more than a legal document. It's the agreement that binds us together as one nation, in the spite of many languages, cultures, traditions, and backgrounds. It tells every South African, but Speaker, I can't also just come here and celebrate the Constitution. I must also state facts. The Khoi and San, the First Nation, are still not in this Constitution. 30 years in Section 6 and does not name our languages. 30 years in Chapter 12 does not name our people. 30 years and we must be recognized by an act but erased by a supreme law. 30 years and the fishermen don't have proper quotas. 30 years and gang violence in our communities are normal. 30 years and the SAKK are not integrated into the SANDF. 30 years and Afrikaans hip-hop are not being played on national radio stations. And 36 years ago, FV de Klerk under the apartheid government repealed the Race Classification Act of 1950. But this constitution classified us as part of the minority. No, Speaker, die feit van die sak is, ons as kleurling mense in die land het nie hier aangekom met skepe nie. Almal het ons hier kom kry in Suider-Afrika. Die is ons land. Ons is die afstammelinge van die Khoi en San. Maar nog steeds vandag, Speaker, die Constitution het ons geclassify as deel van die minority. Ons is nie die minority nie. Ons is deel van die majority. Ons is Africans in particular, net soos die rest van julle. So, vandag, Speaker, ek celebrate die Constitution, but equally, as ek nie happy met die Constitution, as ek kom met die sogenaamde kleurling in die lande nie. Ons bysa nie, dankie.
Honorable Mulder.
Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Deputy Minister of Justice spoke this morning about the origins of the Constitution, and he almost created the impression that the ANC did it all by themselves. He knows that's not true. It was a process. I was privileged to be a member of the Constituent Assembly between 1994 until 1996. I also served on the Negotiations Council, and I had the privilege to announce the agreement that was reached at the time with regard to Section 185, the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities. I think that was a very important commission, and the failure of that commission is part of the problem I think that we've got at the moment. The Constitution, this document, is supposed to enhance nation building, is supposed to enhance social cohesion. And the question that arises immediately is, if we have continuously to have one event after the other with regard to nation building and social cohesion, have we succeeded in doing so? Has the Constitution succeeded in bringing nation building and social cohesion? What is nation building? Nation building is the deliberate process of constructing a unified national identity, establish institutions that reflect common values, to bridge divides and foster loyalty to the Constitution and the state. Have we succeeded in this? I listened this morning to some of the parties, and most of them clearly indicated that although they support the Constitution, there are things in the Constitution that they are not happy with, and that there are things in the Constitution that they would like to see changed. The question basically remains, is the Constitution homegrown? Is the current Constitution the product of what's in the hearts and the minds of the people it wants to serve? That is the test. That is the real challenge. And it's correct. The Constitution is a living document, and the living document can be amended from time to time, although I get the impression that some of the parties in the House wants to get rid of the Constitution altogether. I listened to what the Conference of the Left had to say over the weekend. I listened to what the Honourable Member of the EFF, and I see they have left now, have said about property rights, and very unhappy with the fact that we guarantee private property rights. Well, the last time I had a look, I saw the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF has got property of more than 35 million, so I don't understand when sometimes it suits them and sometimes it does not suit them. The EFF has also indicated that it's time for a second republic. They are wrong. We've already now, at the moment, we are in the third republic, and if you want a new republic, it will be the fourth republic. The question remains, is the Constitution the product of what's in the hearts and the minds of all South Africans? And I think the fact that we are struggling with social cohesion and nation building is because we do not necessarily accommodate the aspirations of all South Africans. What does that mean? It does not mean that we have to get rid of the Constitution, definitely not. But I honestly believe there are certain possibilities within the current Constitution that we have not really developed to the full extent, that we have not given content to. And I think once we do that, it will definitely assist in bringing social cohesion and make it stronger and get us to stronger nation building. We can do that. It's possible to achieve that in practice. At the moment, I'm concerned about the fact that there are certain court cases going on against some perpetrators allegedly of the past, but it's one-handed. You remember what the interim constitution said? There's a need for understanding and not vengeance. There's a need for reparation and not retaliation. There's a need for Ubuntu and victimization. Is that what's happening at the moment? Or are we experiencing the opposite of that? And I think that will be a problem. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Inkosi Mwelo-Nkonyane.
Madam Speaker, honourable members, Molweni, I rise to participate in this important debate for and on behalf of the African National Congress that was founded by our forebears on January 8, 1912, and mandated by them to take over the National Democratic Revolution, which they initiated as far back as the 16th century, as we gather to commemorate one of the most significant milestones in the history of our democratic republic, the adoption of the Constitution. The Constitution was not handed to us, it was earned through sacrifices. It emerged from the centuries of colonial dispossession and decades of apartheid oppression. It was forged through struggle, resistance, negotiation, and reconciliation. It bears the fingerprints of those who sacrificed their freedom, their livelihoods, and in many instances, their lives so that future generations could enjoy dignity, equality, and freedom. As we celebrate 30 years of constitutional democracy, we honor the generations of freedom fighters, constitutional architects, and ordinary South Africans who made this democratic breakthrough possible. We pay tribute to President Nelson Mandela, Oliver Reginald Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chris Hani, Albertina Sisulu, Joe Slovo, and countless others whose sacrifices paved the way for South Africa we all know and South Africa we want. We also remember Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, whose moral leadership reminded us that nation building requires both justice and reconciliation. Through his stewardship, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he helped our nation confront painful truths whilst choosing healing over hatred and unity over division. Honourable members, 30 years ago, South Africa adopted a constitution founded on human dignity, equality, freedom, accountability, responsiveness, and openness. Our constitution became more than a legal document. It became a national covenant. It became the legal expression of the aspiration contained in the Freedom Charter and the democratic ideals that emerged from the negotiations that shaped our motherland. It declared to the world that South Africa belonged to all who live in it, united in our diversity. Today, 30 years later, our constitution remains one of the most progressive constitutional frameworks in the world. It continues to guide our democracy, protect our rights, and provide a framework for building a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. Yet, as we reflect on this important milestone, we must honestly acknowledge that whilst we are not where we were in 1996. We are also not yet where we want to be. The task of nation building remains unfinished. The challenge before us is to ensure that every South African experiences the dignity, equality and opportunity promised by our constitutional order. Honourable members, nation building cannot succeed without strong democratic institutions. The framers of our constitution understood that democracy requires more than elections. It requires institutions capable of protecting rights, holding power accountable and safeguarding the constitutional governance. It is for this reason that Chapter 9 institutions were established to strengthen constitutional democracy. Public protector serves as an independent constitutional watchdog mandated to investigate improper conduct, maladministration and abuse of power in state affairs. It exists to ensure that public officials and organs of state remain accountable to the people of South Africa. The South Africa Human Rights Commission is entrusted with promoting, protecting and monitoring the observance of human rights. It plays a critical role in advancing the culture of human rights, etc. Honourable members, these institutions remain pillars of our democratic architecture. They protect citizens against abuse of power, defend constitutional rights, and strengthen public confidence in democratic institutions. As Parliament, we have a constitutional responsibility to exercise effective oversight while simultaneously protecting the independence, impartiality, and integrity of these institutions. We acknowledge the contribution made by former public protector Thuli Madonsela, whose tenure demonstrated the importance of independent constitutional institutions in advancing accountability, combating maladministration, and reinforcing the rule of law. Honourable members, our diversity must never become a source of division. It remains one of our greatest national strengths. The pursuit of reconciliation remains one of the most important responsibilities of our democracy. Honourable members, a cohesive nation is one in which every citizen enjoys equal dignity, equal protection under law. Women must participate fully and equally in every sphere of society and must be free from violence and discrimination. Young people must have access to education, employment opportunities, and pathways to economic participation. Persons with disabilities must enjoy meaningful inclusion in all aspects of social, economic, and political life. Members of LGBTQI communities must continue to enjoy the protections and freedoms guaranteed by our Constitution. A nation cannot achieve genuine cohesion whilst any society remain excluded. Before I leave, the Constitution clearly indicates and underscores that the ANC has always understood the constitutional democracy and traditional leadership are not contradictory. The Constitution itself recognizes the institution status and role of the traditional leadership because it recognizes that democracy is strengthened when it embraces both constitutional values and our rich African heritage. The history of African National Congress is deeply intertwined with the institution of traditional leadership. When the ANC was founded, traditional leaders were amongst those gathered to form this organization and support its vision. Leaders such as King Dinizulu Kacetywayo of the Zulu nation, together with traditional leaders from Abatembu, Amampondo, Amatosa, Bapeti, and all the nations in South Africa were there. The founding conference, together with traditional leaders, intellectuals, churches, and community representatives under the leadership of pioneers such as John Langalbale Dube and others, were part of this of the establishment of the African National Congress. Before I leave this podium, Madam Speaker, voting is not merely a constitutional right, it is a civic responsibility. We honor that sacrifice by participating, we honor that sacrifice by defending our democracy. 30 years ago, South Africa chose hope over fear. They chose dialogue over conflict. They chose unity over division. They chose constitutional democracy over oppression. Today, our responsibility is to ensure the promise of the Constitution continues. Let us strengthen our democratic institution. Let us deepen our social cohesion. Let us advance reconciliation and transformation. Let us strengthen both constitutional democracy and traditional leadership. Let us build an inclusive society for all of us. Let us continue to work envisioned in the preamble of our Constitution. 30 years later, the Constitution remains our guide. 30 years later, the Constitution remains our collective achievement. 30 years later, the responsibility to build a nation envisioned by our Constitution rests with all of us. Let us continue to this journey. Aluta continua.
Honorable Kay Litape.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Constitution is a living document. It has been amended at least 16 times. We've been told that it is the best constitution in the world, but for ordinary citizens, it has not delivered on the promise. That does not mean there's something wrong with the Constitution. It means that those that have been given the responsibility to deliver to the people have failed. We from Action SA would like certain things to be clarified. The preamble says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We would like that to be clarified as referring to citizens. Because if South Africa belongs to the world, it'll make South Africa ungovernable, as we have seen. If South Africa belongs to the world, there's no need to police your borders, as we have seen. So we would want it clarified that it belongs to citizens. If you read the preamble further, it mentions citizens twice. Every citizen is equally protected by the law. Equality of life for all citizens. So there is an emphasis on citizens even in the preamble. So you need clarification so that it is not subject to interpretation. The second part of the Constitution that we would like amended refers to Section 26. We want to remove the universal nature of the right to housing by clarifying that the obligation to provide temporary emergency accommodation in instances of illegal land or property occupation is limited to South Africans and persons lawfully in the Republic. Any illegal foreigner that occupies land is a form of aggression and should be treated as an act of war. We have a defense force that has to ensure sovereignty, and we need to ensure that people understand that we are a nation. We are not a stopover for criminals. And in the last few seconds, I'd like people to know that this Constitution does not promote unlawful conduct. But the way we have governed, the way we have resourced the police, the way we have resourced justice, we have ensured that instead of a criminal justice system, we have a criminal reward system. And we need to ensure that the police are properly resourced. Border Management Authority must have its own people. No police should be decanted to BMA. BMA must be properly resourced so that the rule of law can be upheld.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time is up. Thank you. Honourable K.R.J. Mishra.
Honourable Speaker, today we mark 30 years since the adoption of our Constitution that promises dignity, equality and security for every South African and extends its Bill of Rights to everyone within our republic, and this includes foreign nationals. Sadly, today's commemoration takes place in the wake of deadly anti-migrant protests that have caused concerned African countries such as Ghana and Malawi to arrange for the repatriation of their citizens. On Friday, the 29th of May, 3 people, 2 Mozambicans and a South African teenager by the name of Ntlamulo Sambo were killed in Mossel Bay after these xenophobic violence erupted in Kwanongaba, leaving 55 shacks torched and hundreds of people displaced. We are grateful that the police, assisted by fire services and disaster management teams, were able to contain the mayhem. The tragedy of the murder of 18-year-old Ntlamulo is that he was suspected of being a foreigner when in fact he is a South African. This young man belonged to the Tsonga tribe from Limpopo, whose people generally have a darker skin color than mine, and it was this that made his attackers think he was a foreigner and targeted him. Speaker, when people see me standing next to Honorable Ghana Makashud, who has a darker skin color than mine, they might think and conclude that he's a foreign national. But to attack or harm Honorable Ghana just because of his skin's darker tone would be unthinkable.
Order, Honorable Mishra. Can you take a seat? Honorable Douglas, what's the point of order?
Honourable Speaker, I rise in Rule 85. Members may not deliberately mislead the House. There was just a press conference by the police saying that it was not related to xenophobia, that the person is a local person in South Africa. So we need to rectify the record live before the people so that it doesn't come out wrong. There was the police has clarified this matter and we need to get the right results out. Thank you.
Honourable Member, allow me to actually reflect on that matter and then give a ruling to the House.
Thank you.
Honourable Reddy, what's the point of order?
Honourable Speaker, the member on the podium is body shaming Honourable Ghana.
No, Honourable Member, that's not a point of order.
Honourable Ghana is comfortable with that. He's not saying anything.
Order, Honourable Mishra. Honourable Mishra, allow the Speaker to rule. Don't make a ruling on your own. Honourable Letika.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I would like to check if Honourable can take a question because this issue of darker colors.
Order, Honourable Member.
Cannot be
Order, Honourable Letika. Honourable Mishra, can you take a question?
Awa.
Okay. Thank you. Honourable members, when you want to ask a member to take a question, please allow the Speaker to rule. Don't continue to ask your question. Thank you. Honourable Minister, thank you. Honourable, continue.
Discrimination on the basis of one's skin color is wrong and has no place in our new democracy. The ACDP strongly condemns these illegal hate-fueled attacks. We extend our deepest condolences to the family of Mr. Sambo and to all those who have lost their loved ones as a result of this uprising. For those who were injured, we also pray for their speedy recovery and healing. The ACDP calls on all peace-loving South Africans to love, respect and protect innocent foreign nationals who live among us, particularly those who are legally in the country. Speaker, as we commemorate the freedoms we enjoy as a result of our constitution, let us not lose the spirit of Ubuntu and moral fortitude that carried us through many unsettling years of transition towards the constitutional democracy we enjoy, a miracle that garnered South Africa the awe and respect of countries across the globe.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Your time is up. Thank you. Honourable Medupi.
Honourable Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honourable Members of the National Assembly, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans. Today, as we gather in this joint sitting of the two houses of Parliament to commemorate the 30 years of the adoption of Constitution of South Africa, we celebrate not merely legal text, but social contract and promise of renewal. The preamble of the Constitution states that we, the people of South Africa, adopt this Constitution so as to heal the division of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, improve the quality of lives of all citizens, and free the potential of each person. These words were written by the nation emerging from colonialism and apartheid, a nation that chose reconciliation over retribution and justice over division. As former President Nelson Mandela stated, for to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. 30 years ago, we were not one nation. We were two South Africans separated by law, by skin, by fences, and by fear. Some of us grew up in passbooks in our pockets. Some grew up not knowing what is meant to be called free. Some grew up in homes without electricity, without water, without hope that tomorrow will be different. On the 8th of May 1996, our Constitution was adopted as the supreme law of the Republic. The Constitution was not only a product of negotiations process, but a product of blood and tears of those who came before us. Written by a generation that chose to sit at the same table instead of holding guns to each other. Written that the children born in rural village in the northwest, the Gogo in KwaZulu-Natal, the students in Khayelitsha, and the workers on the mines of Rustenburg could all say, this is our country too. The preamble begins with three simple words: we the people, not we the powerful, not we the few, we the people. The one who were told we did not belong. The one whose grandfathers were not allowed to own land. The ones whose mothers' clean houses were not allowed to live in. 30 years later, that Constitution still speaks to us. It says your dignity cannot be taken away. It says your voice matters. It says no one is disposable. It says that even when we fall short, even when unemployment hits, even when the lights go off, we still have a promise to hold each other to. We are here today not because the journey was easy. We are here because the journey was necessary. From past law to the right to vote, from Bantustan to 9 provinces, from a country that divides us to a constitution that calls us one. So as we mark 30 years, let us not only celebrate what's written on paper. Let us remember where we come from. Let us honor the mothers who waited at the prison gates, the fathers who never came home, the students of 1976, the workers who strike for living wage, the sacrifice in which we have this constitution. We come from a broken place, but we chose to build. And for 30 years, that constitution has been our blueprint. 30 years ago, 30 years on, the question before this house is, how far have we gone in putting practical realization of this principle and vision of our nation outlined in the Constitution? When we look at the agenda of transformation of our economy, we can confidently say that face of the South Africa economy is very much different from what it was before in 1994. And we will be the first to acknowledge that we are not where we want to be, but surely we are not where we were before 1994. And the subsequent adoption of our Constitution. Honourable Speaker, our Constitution integrates political and economic right. Section 1 of the Constitution entrenches women's dignity and equality. Section 9 permits measures to redress past discrimination. Section 23 protects labor rights. Section 27 guarantees access to societal security, housing, healthcare, food, and water. This reflects the vision for the South Africa of our future outlined in the seminal document, Freedom Charter, that was adopted in Congress of the People in 1955. The Freedom Charter further provides the principle that the people shall share the country's wealth. The Constitution has laid the foundation for the democratic government since 1994 to develop past legislations that still are intended to ensure that people shall share the country's wealth. President President Cyril Ramaphosa has noted that transformation is not about replacing one ally with another. It is about expanding opportunities that every South Africa can participate fully in our economy. Economic transformation and inclusion therefore means restructuring ownership, control, benefit of the economy to serve all South Africans. Honorable members, under apartheid labor law, black workers were denied basic protection. The Constitution laid foundation for legislation that changed that historical injustice. The Labor Relations Act, Basic Condition of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act created a new labor dispensation. Workers gained the right to organize, to bargain collectively and strike. Unfair discrimination in workplace was prohibited and abolished. Through a broad-based black economic empowerment policy movement beyond narrow enrichment, the objective is to develop black industrialists, professionals, farmers, and workers' ownership schemes, and to direct public procurements towards township enterprise, women-owned business, and youth companies. The impact is visible: a more representative management and professional class. Yet, honorable members, we must acknowledge candidly, pattern of ownership remains concentrated. The policy imperatives, therefore, is to deepen and broaden the BBEE, not to retreat from it. Honorable Speaker, economic growth and inclusion requires infrastructure. Economic transformation cannot occur without energy, water, transport, and digital connectivity. Over 30 years, the democratic state delivered over 4.8 million housing units, electrified 9 out of 10 households, and expanded access to water, sanitation, clinics, and schools. The current programs such as Operation Vulindlela and the Infrastructure Fund are designed to unblock bottlenecks and crowd in private investment in energy, water, and logistic infrastructure. This is essential for industrialization and manufacturing. Section 27 obliges the state to take responsible measures to realize socio-economic right. That obligation is met through special economic zones, support for local manufacturers, and the buy local procurement approach, as well as other initiatives by democratic government to realize socio-economic right. Honorable members, the Constitution commits us to confront triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. In this regard, the democratic government has developed multi-pronged policies that are intended to address the triple challenge of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. Among such policy interventions, firstly, in social protection that ensure that over 28 million citizens receive social grants monthly. These are not grants for charity, but entitlement under Section 27. Secondly, the provision of free basic service. In this regard, approximately 10 million households receive free basic water and electricity. On health and education, our government provides free primary health care and no-fee schools. The National Health Insurance rollout seeks to universalize access to quality health care. On special inclusion, these are the targets supporting the township economy.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Well, when you analyze our Constitution, we have to look at it through a specific lens that considers both the normative values and the aspirational values of the Constitution. The normative values are the standard by which we judge ourselves in terms of the progress we've made, which are contained in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights. On the one hand, it's the aspirational values. We talk about the kind of South Africa we seek to become. So one is a stock concept, another one is a flow concept, because it measures progress. One cannot deny the fact that much has been achieved since 1994. I mean, when it comes to access to basic education, basic services, basic education, basic health care, and what we're grappling with as a country really is a matter of access versus quality, right? To say there is access definitely and progress has been made, but what is the quality of that access? And that becomes work in progress. The second issue, which is important, it would not be great for a party that has sat in the opposition for this entire time to come here and recite statistics about how many houses have been built, how many hospitals have been built. Yes, we acknowledge that is progress, but doing so from the perspective of the UDM would be equivalent to us enjoying the sunshine of a dawn we didn't create. But what we have to do is to acknowledge that progress and say it is great. But what the Constitution also does for us is that it serves more importantly as a mirror for us with the stock and the flow concept I was talking about, to say what progress have we achieved and what kind of society do we seek to become? Because the aspirational values of the South African Constitution are contained in our preamble and they are clear. Issues of social justice, some taken from Tate Mandashe's Freedom Charter and the ANC great, which are great values, and are values that determine the kind of South Africa we seek to become. And that journey has been made since 1994 to date, 1996 when we first adopted the Constitution to date, and we must acknowledge that progress has been made. And we must put all hands on deck to ensure that even more work is done to try and improve the plight of the poor, to try and take people out of the malaise of poverty and underdevelopment, to make sure that we are we become not just the Africa we want, but the kind of South Africa we seek to become, and set the example, as we've always done and we continue to do for the rest of the continent, and continue to punch above the weight as a country, and make sure that we, the kind of South Africa that the forebears, the people who sacrificed for our country, the people who wanted South Africa to be where it is today, can be proud of, so that they don't turn in their graves because of corruption, state capture, and all the other problems that we've experienced in the past. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I've noted that the lights have dimmed. It's not 10 of the lights, but we will try and make sure that we fix those lights. Honorable member, what's the point of order?
Honorable Speaker, it's not a point of order, it's just a caution. The heaters have actually gone down, the air conditioners, with the lights together.
Thank you very much. That will be attended to.
Thank you so much.
I just want to make a ruling on the matter that was raised by Honorable Douglas when Honorable Mishwe was presenting his intervention. And it is true that the South African Police Service did say, from their own information, is that the matter of Nhlamulo was a criminal matter. It is alleged that the young man may have been involved in a house robbery. However, his family denied that and maintained it was an act of xenophobia. So as it stands, there are two versions to the story. And I think what Honorable Meshwe was raising in the context of his speech, and not body shaming Honorable Ghana, but it was a caution to say, as we deal with these matters, the reality is that as we other the others who may not be coming from our shores, we can end up making a mistake that those that don't seem to look like us might actually be fallen of the other acts of violence. That was the context, and I thought it is important to clarify that. Thank you, honorable members. I now call upon Honorable Ghana.
There's a lot to celebrate that has been achieved under our constitution, but we can all agree that more still needs to be done. 30 years ago, I was 12 years in the village of Lifaro. The first half of 1996 was a celebratory time for our country. Bafana had just become the African champions. And for those ones who are young at heart like me, will remember the Bafana game that we played against Brazil at the FNB Stadium in 1996. And then the constitution was passed. I want to, on behalf of Rise Mzansi, first wish Bafana well for the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the USA, Mexico, and Canada. Like many others, our constitution shaped the trajectory of my life. It provided for rights, freedoms, and principles which form the foundation of the South Africa I want to live in. One that is based on equality, dignity, and freedom for all. For me, it has opened doors that will otherwise have been sealed shut for the generations that came before me. Yet, it is not the constitution alone that gave me the opportunity to go from my village in Tsanin to be standing here in front of you today. It was the people who dedicated their lives to upholding and giving effect to the provisions of our supreme law. We stand on the shoulders of these giants in the work that we do, and I continue to take my inspiration from them. Still, we must be honest, we do not yet live in a safe, prosperous, equal, and united South Africa that our constitution envisaged. Honorable members, we do not yet have this South Africa because many in the positions that we hold have decided not to honor their duty to South Africans, their duty to demand accountability, transparency, and to ensure that this government works for the people. As you all know, I was elected as the chairperson of the Impeachment Committee this week that will conduct an inquiry in terms of Section 89 of this very same constitution. Our committee's first task is, our committee is the first of its kind in South Africa, and its very formation is a victory for this constitution. And all of us who have dedicated our lives to upholding the principles of the constitution. The constitution is not mere words on paper. It is a promise of a better South Africa and a commitment by every public representative to make it so. The South Africa that we dreamed of in 1994 and captured by the Constitution of 1996 is still within reach.
Thank you. Honorable Duplessis.
Good morning, Honourable Speaker, members, and most importantly, fellow South Africans. On 12 September 1989, my grandfather received a call. It was a call to tell him that his only son, Anton Lubowski, was brutally murdered. Like so many freedom fighters, my uncle's life was cut short by a callous state that saw themselves as judge, jury, and executioner. As a human rights lawyer, he defended the Uppington 26, which further placed him in the crosshairs of the cold-hearted National Party. His assassination was a culmination of years for fighting for the rule of law, being the voice of the vulnerable, and fearlessly defending equality, regardless of the characteristics of birth. And like so many brave activists shaped by the injustices of the time, he was imprisoned and killed without any consideration of human rights or the rule of law. Anton Lubowski, like so many, did not die so that we can simply possess a constitution. He died so that we could live by it. He died, and his sacrifice was to live for the words printed on paper. He sacrificed his life for what those words promised: human dignity, equality before the law, accountability, justice, and freedom. Yet, today, as we celebrate 30 years of a document forged in sacrifice, we need to remember that the Constitution is not a monument to our struggle. It is the unfinished work of our struggle. The struggle against apartheid was never simply about changing a government. It was about ending the abuse of power. It was about ensuring that no South African would ever again be denied dignity, justice, or equality before the law. These promises were written into our Constitution 30 years ago, but every unresolved Truth and Reconciliation Commission case, every delayed prosecution, every family still waiting for answers remind us that constitutional democracy is not self-executing. When families wait 40 years for justice, this is not merely a failure of prosecution, it is a failure of constitutional governance. Section 9 promises equality before the law. Section 10 guarantees human dignity. Section 34 guarantees access to courts. Section 179 requires prosecuting authorities to act without fear, favor, or prejudice. When these promises remain unfulfilled for victims of apartheid crimes, we must ask ourselves whether we have even started our journey to constitutional democracy. Successive callous governments led by the ANC failed to pursue hundreds of cases referred to state prosecutors by the TRC. Families of Amit Timol and Anton Lubowski still face stalled prosecutions and ongoing legal battles against alleged political interference. More than 40 years later, the families of the Craddock Four are still desperately fighting for justice against whispers of political games. The families of Matthew Gonwe, Ford Kalata, and Sparrow Makoto are still pursuing justice more than 40 years later, frustrated by missing dockets and decades of delayed decisions. There are thousands more names. Honourable members, we often hear from our people that the Constitution doesn't work for them. We hear calls for the Constitution to be amended, but the fact is that the Constitution is a well-crafted document, but like so many South African laws, the problem does not lie with the document, but in the implementation. If the ANC government had spent the last 30 years properly implementing the laws and plans that have been crafted in the democratic South Africa, we would be in a far better place as a country. As we celebrate 30 years of this exceptional document, we must commit to better implementation of its details and principles under the government of the national unity and beyond.
Order, Honourable Member. Honourable Reddy, don't run a commentary while the Speaker is on the podium. You don't do that. Honourable Reddy, you don't do that. Thank you. Proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The generation of Lubowski, Timol, Goniwe, Kalata, Makoto, and so many more fought and died for this document. It is therefore our responsibility to keep fighting for their legacy to be enacted in the implementation of the Constitution of South Africa, so that we can truly break free of the legacy of apartheid and exemplify constitutional democracy. Let their deaths not be in vain. Let us celebrate, let us implement this document forged in sacrifice. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable V. Gerike, just to remind you, we do have a seat provided for all of us to wait before we speak, not on the stairs. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Speaker. Just that I got late notice that I'm the next speaker. As Speaker, I stand on the protocol already established. Today we stand in solidarity with the nation as we commemorate the historic 30th anniversary of the South African Constitution. It is of utmost importance to note that this Constitution is a result of a bitter struggle against apartheid, oppression, and human rights abuses to bring about freedom, equality, and dignity to all who live in South Africa. Yet, Chairperson, as we mark 3 decades of this transformative text, we must also confront the failures of the DA-led government of national unity in meeting the requirements of this Constitution. Our Constitution is celebrated globally for its progressive Bill of Rights. However, in practice, it suffers a critical failure and inability to bridge the gap between lofty and legal promises and the reality of municipal service delivery. And in this regard, I will touch on some examples of how the state frequently fails to deliver basic municipal services. This operational breakdown is clearly evident in service delivery failures, more specifically, the management of the housing crisis. Section 26, Speaker, of the Constitution explicitly guarantees everyone the right to have access to have adequate housing. It legally obligates the state to adopt reasonable legislative and development measures within its available resources to ensure the progressive realization of this right. And needless to say, Speaker, the implementation mechanism has failed to keep pace with these legal requirements, as there are hundreds of thousands of vulnerable families that remain on municipal housing waiting lists, forced to live in informal settlements without formal infrastructure. In
In informal settlements like Diep Sloot and parts of Johannesburg, thousands of families lived without formal shelter, proper sanitation or electricity as elsewhere in the country. This reality is mainly due to a lack of implementation and the incompetence of political office bearers and lazy officials. While provinces like the Eastern Cape stand as examples of the state's failure to deliver Section 27 rights, specifically access to healthcare and water. In rural municipalities across the Oliver Tambo and Amatole districts, hospitals and clinics are chronic medicine shortages, dilapidated structures, and a lack of clean running water. This is a travesty of the constitutional provisions for people in need of basic necessities. In DA-governed metros and shared GNU spaces across all provinces, service delivery is routinely crippled by bureaucratic red tape, continuous budget cuts, and a failure to upgrade informal settlements. This failure is also evident at the municipal level, Speaker, where corruption, administrative chaos, and political cadre deployment has stripped local governance of any real capacity. As the Auditor General's report consistently shows, most South African municipalities are financially unstable and incapable of managing public funds. This reality proves that a progressive constitution on its own is powerless without competent leadership to execute its laws. And when the state lacks an efficient, transparent mechanism to construct housing and develop vital infrastructure, the constitutional right to adequate shelter remains nothing more than a theoretical concept of impoverished citizens. Speaker, the preamble of the Constitution states that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in all our diversity. It is therefore hurting to see how this provision is contradicted by bigots and xenophobes when migrants are giving the runaround in our country. The campaign of hatred against people who do not look like these bigots or speak the language of these xenophobes is intensifying. And yet the state is standing arms folded when migrants are chased around, robbed and assaulted. There is no other way to describe it but to conclude that this violence is state-sponsored. Just 2 days ago, Speaker, I conducted a prayer service in Mossel Bay. Reverend Kenneth Meshu, I'm on the ground there, standing in solidarity with a grieving family whose young son was brutally murdered. This innocent child was stolen from his family by bigots who targeted him simply because he spoke Kichonga, mistakenly labeling him as a foreigner. This heartbreaking tragedy, fueled by prejudice, stands in direct and violent defiance of everything our Constitution stands for. The right to safety and security is enshrined in the Constitution. The work of the police is cut out for them in Section 205 of the Constitution. They must prevent, combat and investigate crime and maintain public order. They must protect and secure inhabitants of the Republic and their property. For when a young child is murdered on public streets due to linguistic profiling and perceived nationality, it signals a profound collapse in the state's primary security mechanism. A constitution is rendered an empty promise when law enforcement repeatedly fails to shield vulnerable people from targeted violence and xenophobic vigilantism. I close. This constitution was designed to be a transformative blueprint, but it cannot override the incompetence of ideological misalignment of the politicians elected to execute its vision. And as retired Deputy Chief Justice Dick Moseneke once remarked, the Constitution is permissive of justice and redistribution, but it remains up to the citizens and their elected governments to do the actual work of governance. Therefore, while the Constitution promises a life of dignity, the continued failure in service delivery represents a failure of the state. And so, Speaker, as the EFF, we will continue to demand the active enforcement of the rule of law and radical proposals for constitutional revision. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Gerike. Honorable Mpina. House Chairperson, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. The anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa marks a pivotal moment in the history of our nation. It presents us with an opportunity to reflect honestly on the journey we have traveled since the dismantling of apartheid and the birth of our democratic order. I must say, this has not been an easy journey. It has been marked by both significant progress and undeniable setbacks. Yet, despite the many challenges that we continue to confront, we remain deeply appreciative of democratic gains we have achieved together as people of South Africa. Most importantly, we remain firmly committed to fully realizing the vision embodied in our Constitution, a nation founded on a human dignity, equality, freedom, and justice for all. Honorable members, for the past 30 years, this democratic government has worked tirelessly to advance and protect the fundamental human rights and freedoms enriched in our Constitution. These include freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of religion, and rights of every citizen
citizens to participate freely in the democratic processes of our country. In keeping with the clarion call of Freedom Charter that says, I quote, "The people shall govern," close quote. South Africans have since the first democratic elections in 1994 consistently participated in free and fair elections, exercising their constitutional guaranteed democratic rights to elect a government of their choice. Yet again, on the 4th of November this year, 2026, South Africans will return to the polls during the local government elections. Therefore, allow me to use this opportunity to call upon all South Africans who have not yet registered to vote to do so. Registering to vote is not a merely administrative process. It's an affirmation of our democracy and important expression of active citizen. Another defining feature of our constitution is affirmation of the rights of every person to live free from violence, discrimination, intimidation, and fear. Our constitution affirms the equal worth and dignity of women, children, persons with disabilities, and all vulnerable groups in our society. Yet, despite these constitutional guarantees, far too many South Africans continue to confront the harsh realities of violent crime on a daily basis. Gender-based violence and femicide continues to rob women and children of their dignity, their safety, and freedom. These realities remind us that the struggle for social justice remains far from complete. Hence, we support the declaration of GBVF as a national disaster and the commitment of resources to tackle this crisis. Yes, the Constitution gives us rights, but it also imposes responsibilities upon all of us, government, business, labor, civil society, and communities, to work together to build the South Africa envisaged by our democratic founders, prosperous, democratic, non-racial, and non-sexist society. House Chairperson, at times there are those who seek to undermine our constitutional institutions. There are those who question the value of constitutional democracy when confronted by frustrations, inequalities, and hardships experienced by many of our people. We must be clear that answers to our challenges is not less constitutionalism nor less democracy. The answer lies in the full implementation of the Constitution. It lies in a strengthening ethical accountability and developmental governance. It lies in building capable institutions that serves our people efficiently, honestly, and with integrity. As public representatives, we carry a responsibility to ensure that the promises contained in our Constitution translated into lived realities of our people. This requires ethical leadership, effective service delivery, economic transformation, and the creation of sustainable jobs, particularly for young people and women who continue to bear the greatest burden of our unemployment and inequality. Honorable members, the Constitution requires us to advance substantively equality, recognizes that equality cannot merely exist in law while millions remains excluded from meaningful economic participation. We must confront the deep social and economic injustice inherited from our painful past. The transformation of our economy and the meaningful participation of historical disadvantaged South Africans in the mainstream of our economy can no longer be delayed. It is within this context that government continues to advance inclusive economic participation through programs such as Artisanal and Small-Scale Mining Fund, Junior Mining Exploration Fund, and the Social Labor Plan programs. These interventions are aimed at ensuring that benefits of our country's minerals wealth are shared equitably, and the mining communities themselves becomes meaningful beneficiaries of the economic development. As we move forward, we must ensure that young people of South Africa continues to see democracy as a vehicle for dignity and progress. This is important because ultimate success of our constitutional democracy will not be measured only by the strength of our laws or the resilience of our institution. It will also be measured by whether every South African experiences dignity, safety, equality, and opportunity in their daily lives. As we commemorate 30 years of the Constitution, let us recommit ourselves to values upon which our democracy was founded. Let us continue working together to build a united, non-racial, non-sexist democratic and prosperous South Africa. Let us defend and uphold the Constitution not only through words but through our unwavering commitments to serve the people of South Africa with integrity, humility, and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable members, we were supposed to break for we were supposed to take a comfort break, but due to the minimum number of speakers, I'm not going to allow that. We are going to proceed with the debate. I'm now inviting Honorable Ismail Musa to take the podium.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, and fellow beloved family of South Africans. In the name of Almighty, the most gracious and the most merciful, I greet our beautiful nation with the warmest of greetings of prayer, peace, love, and goodwill. Our Constitution is a covenant between the people and the vision and future we seek to build together. Our Constitution stands as a beacon and moral compass of hope, justice, equality, human dignity, respect for all religions, cultures, emerging from a painful political history of division, injustice, and oppression. Every human deserves a right to dignity, respect, and equal worth, regardless of social status. As beloved citizens, leaders, and public representatives, we are called upon to uphold constitutional values, promote social cohesion, respect diversity, and protect the democratic institution that serves our people. The Constitution also teaches us the importance of dialogue and respect for differing views. The Constitution encourages us to resolve our differences through democratic engagement rather than division and conflict. As South Africans, we should take pride in having one of the world's most respected constitutions in the world. It stands as a beacon of hope, demonstrating how a nation can overcome the past and build a future founded on justice, truth, reconciliation, and human dignity. The values of our Constitution dictate equality before the law, human dignity, respect, freedom of justice, unity in diversity. Let us serve, take on our responsibilities seriously with courage, pride, and common vision of unity, respecting and protecting the safety of human life. I thank you. Malibongwe.
Honorable Nzimande.
I'm standing on established protocol on behalf of Umkhonto wesizwe. Umzabalazo wethu bokubuya isizwe nokuthatha umnotho. Not to manage the country on behalf of those that usurp our country and our economy. Lokho kuyobe kukudayisa amakhosi ohlanga ocetshwayo osikhukhuni obhambatha nomzilikazi nohalishiwe. Siyakusho ke namhlanje sithi siyavumelana nomama engasekho uMadikizela Mandela ukuthi le constitution eyanegotiate umongameli walaba, it was over negotiated and protected the rights of those thieves that stole the country and are owning the resources of our country. The constitution is betrayal of the workers, betrayal of justice of our people, for our people, including Urom Yokor, people of Kwamakuta, Wipatong, Shaville, maimed to derail all freedoms by the apartheid regime. Identity, basic human rights, the right to exist in their own land, right to own their land and resources. Today we are compelled to ask a painful question. Really, was it necessary for the ANC to think that it's the rightful party to be a leader of the revolution of the oppressed, whilst knowingly at this juncture and at crucial stage of our revolution, it will turn back and sleep in same bed with Freedom Front Plus, DA AfriForum, the parties representing the symbol of oppressors, who maimed the defenseless women and children in their sleep and in the trains. It gave them place to build a university to preserve the language of the oppressors at Pretoria and here in Western Cape. Kodwa umuntu onsundu mangabe ethi uzama uvikela isithunzi sakhe yazakhele imuzi mayibona indawanyana engathi ingconywana engakha benza ihluku bavele badiliza imizi yabo ngendlela ebuhlungu. Hambe eTonville uzayibona leyo nto. The great betrayal of 1994. Our people were told freedom has arrived, dignity has been restored, victory is certain. But what has changed for the black majority? The land is still not ours, the minerals are still not ours, the banks are still not ours, the economy is still not ours. Millions remain unemployed, millions remain landless and are tenants in the land of their ancestors. Millions remain trapped in poverty. What we have told today is a constitutional democracy without economic justice. That is not freedom, that is managed inequality. Rights enshrined in the constitution without land are empty words. The central question of South Africa has always been the land question. Colonialism and apartheid were not simply systems of racism. They were systems of economic theft. Land was stolen, mineral wealth was stolen, labor was and still exploited. And yet today, 30 years after democracy, the descendants of the depossessed are told to be patient. But Umkhonto wesizwe says enough is enough. That is why MK Party stands for expropriation of land without compensation, state custodianship of land, agrarian transformation, restoration of African ownership of the economy. Because land is not just property, land is freedom, land is dignity, land is justice. Economic liberation is the new front line. Our revolution was not about voting every 5 years. It meant the right to work, the right to economic emancipation, the right to share in the wealth of the country, and the right in the ownership of the land and mineral resources. Still in the presence of this constitution, today South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. A small minority control the world, the majority survive on the march. This is why...
Thank you very much, Honorable Nzimande. Honorable Farmer.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members and fellow South Africans, I greet you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Today we gather to reflect on a document that forms the bedrock of our democracy, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Often praised as one of the most progressive in the world, it champions human dignity, equality, and freedom. Its preamble declares that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Yet, for our country's true First Nations, the Khoi, San, and the Nama people, the reality remains profoundly different. Beneath the celebrated text lies a painful legacy of constitutional neglect and the continued exclusion of indigenous identity, considered a fundamental right to be recognized. While our constitution officially recognizes 11 languages, it notably omits Khoisan languages for this list. When the founding fathers sat down to negotiate the new South Africa, the dialogue centered primarily on redressing the conflicts between the major racial groups, Africans, whites, Indians, and coloreds. In doing so, the state institutionalized broad racial categories that lumped indigenous First Nations into the legacy of apartheid labels. By not granting indigenous languages official status or systematically acknowledging their ancestral sovereignty, the Constitution risks erasing a deeply rooted cultural heritage. The most tangible and devastating impact of this exclusion lies in land rights. Our Constitution is bound by the Property Clause Section 25, which protects existing property rights while attempting to facilitate land restitution. Let us honor the whole of our history, not just the parts that came after colonial contact. It is time we align our supreme law with our highest moral values, ensuring that South Africa truly belongs to all who live in it, especially those who lived in it first. A constitution is not a static monument, it is a living document. For South Africa to fully embody the inclusive nation it claims to be, we must confront these gaps. True reconciliation and justice will only be achieved when our foundational law fully embraces, restores, and protects the dignity and heritage of our very first people. Honorable members, Munibaizani, salute.
Honorable Govender.
The Honorable Chairperson, the National Council of Provinces, honorable members, today as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, we must remember that we are entrusted with a covenant between the people of South Africa founded on human dignity, equality, freedom, accountability, and democratic governance. As we reflect on this important milestone, we must also honor those who helped shape our Constitution and our democracy, and ensure that we have a Constitution that reflects the aspirations of all South Africans. Amongst those who played a significant and constructive role was the visionary leaders of the Inkatha Freedom Party. The IFP entered the constitutional negotiations not as a spectator, but as an active participant in crafting South Africa's democratic future. Through the leadership of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and distinguished leaders such as Dr. Frank Mlalose, Dr. Ben Ngubane, Dr. Lionel Mchali, and many others, the party advanced proposals that strengthened constitutional democracy, promoted national unity, and enriched the final constitution settlement. History records that the IFP was amongst the strongest advocates for a system of provincial government, cooperative governance, and constitutional recognition of traditional leadership. These were not narrow political objectives, honorable members. They were nation-building interventions that sought to balance unity with diversity and ensure that governance remains responsive to the communities it serves. One of the most important outcomes of our constitutional architecture was the establishment of the National Council of Provinces. The NCOP was created to ensure that provincial interests are represented in the national sphere of government and that cooperative governance becomes a lived reality rather than a constitutional aspiration. Since its establishment in 1997, the NCOP has served as a vital bridge between national, provincial, and local government. It is therefore fitting that we remember those important leaders who played a visionary role to ensure that we have the constitution that we can be so proud of today. Honorable Chairperson, 30 years later, the constitutional vision of integrated governance remains as relevant as ever. South Africans do not experience government in three separate spheres. They experience government as one. When water does not flow, when roads deteriorate, when electricity fails, they expect government to respond. And therefore today, let us remember those that crafted this democratic constitution that we are so proud of. I thank you.
Honorable Peter.
Mhlangaphambili manibulele elithuba ndilifumanayo ne-UDM. Mhlangaphambili le constitution sithetha ngawo lo mgaqo siseko welilizwe sithetha ngawo namhlanje ngubani na umntu okhoyo kule ndlu ongenangayihloniphi. Phambi uba kufike lo mgaqo siseko babephi abanye abantu abakule ndlu namhlanje? Babulewe abantu phambi uba kubekho lo mgaqo siseko. Ityala lo mntu yayilibala lakhe, ubulawe libala eli lakho. Asikwazi ungawuhloniphi lo mgaqo siseko, kodwa sinawukwazi ukuwubhiyozela ngoba i-institution ekusuppose uba zisebenza ngomgaqo seko ziyasabothajwa. Umgaqo seko mhlali ngaphambili siyawuhlonipha wona. Mhlali ngaphambili asikwazi ukubhiyozela lo mgaqo seko weli lizwe noxa siwuhlonipha nje babe abantu bethu beyimigodi bebethola inqalo likakhesekile balambile abantu mhlawumbi ngaphambili bazawubhiyoza njani umgaqo-seko usabhotashwa kwangurhulumente lo ulawulayo lo mgaqo-seko usapota aba basemandleni hayi aba bantu bampofu mhlawumbi ngaphambili singaba bantu belilizwe singakwazi njani ukubhiyozela lo mgaqo-seko babe abantu beyimigodi ukuya emangcwabeni bengenelwa ezindlini bebulawa bengakhuselekanga bazawuthini ukubhiyozela lo mgaqo-seko siza kuyinika intlonipho umgaqo-seko ngoba siyakholelwa mhlawumbi ngaphambili ukuba lo mgaqo-seko nguye isiseko selilizwe asikwazi ke ukubhiyozela lo mgaqo-seko kube ezibhedlela abantu babulawela belele emahotini ngoba izibhedlela zikhuselekanga sawukhusela njani lo mgaqo-seko siwubhiyozele ezikolweni ootitshala bayabulawa mhlawumbi ngaphambili sawubhiyozela njani lo mgaqo-seko batitsha abantwana bethu besoyika umgaqo-seko ukhona liphepha mhlawumbi ngaphambili bapha abantu abakhusela lo mgaqo-seko mhlawumbi ngaphambili lo mgaqo-seko siyawuhlonipha siyatsho sileli lizwe kodwa siyi-UDM sithi mhlawumbi ngaphambili asinawukwazi siwubhiyozele singenagutya esiswini kungekho misebenzi abantu belambile abantu bebulawa abantu bengenelwa zii-extortion urhulumente usonge izandla umgaqo-seko ukhona wona uphi lo mgaqo-seko mhlawumbi ngaphambili xa ootitshala ezikolweni bengenawukhuseleka ngaphambili makwethini akweli lizwe yitsaleleni ngasebuhlanti ningxame ukuyibinza ukuze amaxhego abhomboloze ukubiza izinyanya abike ibunzi kwizihlwele umthetho woyisiwe kwanorhulumente woyisiwe ngaloo mazwi mhlawumbi ngaphambili mayirhuqe iye emanzini yona yophusile enkosi
Honorable Priyet, other honorable members.
Dankie, huisvoorsitter. The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all. These are the words of John F. Kennedy. One voter, just one voter can make the difference between constitutional rights that are protected and rights that are ignored. One voter can be the difference between accountability and failure. One voter can be the difference between decline and renewal. In 2021 in Frankfurt, in die Mafube munisipaliteit in die Vrystaat, was dit een stem wat gemaak het dat wat 'n 5+ dorp kon wees, nog 'n 5 jaar onder ANC beheer is. Een stem wat bepaal het hoe daardie dorp vir die volgende 5 jaar bestuur sou word. Vandag staan daardie gemeenskap weer voor 'n keuse. Aanvaar ons die verval of kies ons verandering? And that is why, as we celebrate 30 years of the Constitution, we must remember that a Constitution is not merely a document, it is a promise. As Minister Kubayi said during the launch of the anniversary, the Constitution is a testament of South Africans from different backgrounds who came together to build a nation that belongs to all who live in it. But a promise on paper, if it is not honored in practice, means nothing. The real question 30 years on is this: whether South Africans truly experience the rights guaranteed in the Constitution. Do they experience dignity? Do they experience safety? Do they receive basic services? And do they have confidence in their elected officials? It is our time. It is our time to insist on constitutional rights that are lived realities. Dit is ons tyd om te besluit wat met ons dorpe en ons stede gebeur. Dit is ons tyd om verval te stop en verantwoordbaarheid te eis. Dit is ons tyd om die mense te kies wat werklik ons gemeenskappe eerste stil. Ons is 5 maande weg van die geleentheid waar Suid-Afrikaners weer vir ons hulle toestemming kan gee of dit kan terugtrek. En dit gaan bepaal hoe ons dorpe bestuur word en hoe ons belastinggeld bestuur word. Ek sluit af. Dit is ons tyd. Dit is ons tyd om te kies. Dit is ons tyd om te verander. En dit is ons tyd om Suid-Afrika se grondwet nie net te vier nie, maar om dit te laat werk vir elke burger. Ek dankie.
The next speaker on my list is Honorable Mokai.
Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable members from both houses, and fellow South Africans, good morning. When our Constitution was adopted by the Constitutional Assembly 30 years ago, there was much hope for South Africa. Hope that the dignity of every citizen will be upheld, that the protection of human rights will prevail, that the painful past of our country will never be repeated, and that blood will not spill on the ground again. However, we know that sense of hope has sadly eroded over the years, that those very rights that should be protected are so easily violated, that systemic discrimination, harassment, physical attacks, and murder continues to make our country unsafe. The vulnerable groups in our society, the women, the children, the elderly, and the LGBTQI+ community continue to live in fear. Fear of when they will be attacked, raped, and killed. Fear that when they report crime at their local police stations, they will face second-hand trauma and victimization. Fear that their cases will be struck off the roll due to a lack of evidence because no rape kits were available, and justice that is guaranteed in this very constitution will never be served. These are the lived realities of many citizens in our country. These fears are real. They are felt every day. All must be equal before the law, and all must be equally protected by the law. As we celebrate 30 years of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, let us reflect on these lived realities in line with the key themes of this commemoration of reflect, renew, and recommit. Let us indeed reflect on the fears of the women in Alexandra, in Khalishiwe, in Kailicha, and Umlazi. Let us reflect on the vulnerabilities of the gays and the lesbians of Thokoza, Mamelodi, Tumahole, and Kuruman. These vulnerable citizens continue to question the effectiveness of this constitution, to uphold their dignity and protect their rights. Honorable Chairperson and members, indeed South Africa is celebrated for our progressive and transformative democracy that was installed by this constitution, and aptly founded on human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights. However, for many becomes toothless when their daily lived experiences scream of fear, marginalization, and discrimination. This debate today is held under the theme and in the month of June, which coincides with International Pride Month. Pride Month that stems from the Stonewall riots in June 1969 in the United States. As a proud member of this community, I carry the responsibility to champion our cause in this parliament, of which I'm a member. We must use this commemoration to recommit ourselves to the fact that this constitution will effectively uphold their dignity and protect their rights. That this constitution is not only a ceremonial and toothless document, but a serious pledge for all of us to always uphold the rule of law and fight discrimination and marginalization head on. That we strengthen accountability and build capable institutions that safeguard the freedoms of all South Africans, especially the women, the children, the elderly, and members of the LGBTQI+ community. I thank you. Kia leboga, baie dankie.
Honorable Phala.
Chair of the session, members, honorable members of both houses, the people of the country, Dumelang. Chair and honorable members, allow me to start by my debate in this August House by referring to the words written by Advocate Tembegan Ngwagaitwobe in his book, The Land is Ours. In his introduction, he says, South Africa's constitution stands as a monument in the world. For Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a judge of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, it is not the Constitution of the United States of America that is a model of the world, but the South African Constitution. The magnitude of its vision and ambition is unprecedented, coming after centuries of settler violence, economic exploitation, and apartheid racism. Redistribution is not at its animating thing. South Africa belongs to all it proclaims. The state must facilitate economic justice, the constitutional mandates. The judiciary must protect the Bill of Rights, enforce its promises, and monitor the conduct of government. Yet, despite the admiration of the world, many of the promises contained in the Constitution remain a hollow hope. The advocate's hollow hope narrative resonates with a poetic description by prominent South African poet Mr. Wallace Rote when he said, "Hope is stunted and despair is taking stride." Honorable members, despite the pitfalls on transformation path due to either failures to implement the constitutional provision adequately, nor malfeasance in the system, this Constitution of the Republic reigns supreme. Section 25, subsection 6, subsection 5, subsection 7, subsection 8, subsection 9 requires Parliament to act decisively on behalf of those who bore and continue to bear the hardest miseries of apartheid dispossession. Honourable members, while commemorating the 30th anniversary of this rich monumental document, which in all respects embraces efforts to build a sense of common nationhood and shared destiny. In the 30 years of transformation through the implementation of this constitution, therein were numerous policy developments which are consistent with the founders of this freedom, innate constitutionalism and respect of rights for all. Honourable members, celebrating the supreme law of the land is a noble honor. It's an honor to serve the nation and to recognize men and women who provided honest, principled, and dedicated leadership in pursuit of national unity and reconciliation. The Constitution embraces principles of integrity, democratic functioning, objectivity, respect for people's rights, which we encourage the nation never to lose as its central thrust, which is to create a society in which the fruit of freedom which will be made available to all as champion under the goal of a better life for all. Thus, the determination to see the transformation through the vision of this constitution remains resilient and inspiring. In this regard, the former president of our country, President Thabo Mbeki, in 2008, he said, I quote, "We have sought to advance the vision precisely because we understood that we would fail in the struggle to achieve the nation's social cohesion that our country needs, as well as in the national unity we require to enable us to act together to address the major challenges we face. The vision remains the center of a very future that envisages South Africa as a home of a well-grounded democratic values, namely human rights, equality, peace, stability, and shared prosperity." Honorable members, the Constitution preamble says, we the people of South Africa believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. What does this mean, honorable members? The historical context of the principle should not be misunderstood. This principle emanates from the Freedom Charter, which was adopted in 1955 in Cape Town, wherein our forebears were addressing a challenge of what was termed and still termed colonialism of special type. That the colonizers and the colonized are people who reside who in their birthright share South Africa as their home, meaning people who were born from generation after generation in this country cannot proclaim any other country as their home except South Africa. Honorable members, the critical subject of property rights and redistribution of land have been a challenge in the 30 years since the Constitution was adopted. Justice Albisex has said in his book, I quote, "The Constitution is not self-executing. It does not itself provide equality, build houses, deliver education and health services, or offer protection against violence. What it does do is to establish a clear political, social, moral, institutional framework within which these issues should be tackled." Honorable members, the land reform process operates on 3 pillars, and the people of this country have a serious concern about the slow pace and its complexities in 3 fundamental areas, namely land restitution, land distribution, and land tenure. However, we must all agree, honorable members, and be interested that all these 3 aspects require a country's attention. The call to rally around a new patriotism for us to make a commitment to confront these constitutional challenges facing our communities around the land. Land redistribution and security tenure, and the government's land reform program, strategic efforts to deal with over 3 decades of land theft has made a significant land restitution. In terms of the government data, over 5 million hectares of land have been redistributed to more than 300,000 beneficiaries, while over 80,000 hectares of restitution claims have been settled, benefiting 2.1 million beneficiaries. On land tenure, legislative frameworks have been established to ensure that the communal residents and farm workers have legally recognized in terms of the Bill of Rights. Furthermore, recent legal landscape development of Expropriation Act provide a legislative way forward to restore the dignity of our people. But honorable members, Section 25 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights require that the land reform be expedited, that the process be within the legislated laws, the willing seller and the willing buyer obligation be adhered to, and the criteria for ensuring compensation is just and equitable. This monumental document can be used to expedite land reform program to acquire land in private hands for public use. There's, however, a need to balance intervention in the interest of facilitating the constitutional imperatives of the land reform for public use versus the commercial productivity for national food security. The mix of such potential intervention range from unused lands to great large public, private, or state or cooperative farms to outright expropriation and mixed form of land ownership. Remembering the groundbreaking directive in this regard, Land Claim Court ruling in 2016 by Advocate Tembeka Ngwaitobi, in which compensation was set below market value. The ruling was celebrated for altering progressively the constitutional land reform efforts. Honorable members, the narrative from other sectors of society that the ANC was outmaneuvered during the drafting of the constitution is incorrect. The ANC, the African National Congress, championed the fundamental constitutional measures guided by the struggle policy document, the Freedom Charter, which laid the foundation of the Constitution.
Thank you, Honorable Phala.
Thank you, sir.
Honorable Klopper.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Today we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution. I wanted to use this opportunity not only to praise the sacred document, but to honor the covenant between the state and the people. It is a covenant reached after years of pain and suffering, courageously proclaimed, never again. Never again shall the state be allowed to tread on the inherent rights of its people. Never again shall exclusion triumph over unity, and never again shall we forget that I am because we are. Our constitution was born in the wake of a vile past. Deliberate system of violent oppression, racial domination, exclusion, and cruelty. Apartheid sought to divide us, and ultimately it failed. We, the people of South Africa, defeated apartheid, and the Constitution is our victory song. May we never stop singing it. May its verses resonate from where the Tugela plunges into the fertile valleys below the Ukatamba, from where the waves strike the rocks of our beautiful shores, and from where Urikwacho, the mountain and the sea, watches over the mother city. We, the people, are united. We, the people, are the same, and we, the people, are one. In honoring this document, we must also reflect honestly on the state of our beautiful country. A constitution does not defend itself. It does not walk into a police station. It does not sit in the prosecutor's office. It does not preside over the case. And neither does it stop a corrupt official from putting his hands in the public purse. It protects the citizens only to the extent that those entrusted with public power respect, obey, and ultimately defend it. The commemoration is about the past we rose from, the future we strive towards, and more importantly, where we find ourselves at present. Since the adoption of the Constitution, South Africans have been enforced to endure corruption, unemployment, failing services, broken promises, and deep wounds left from state capture. We have watched public money disappear while schools, clinics, SAPS, and police stations have to do a whole lot more with a whole lot less. Yet every day we wake up, we raise families, build businesses, serve communities, vote, and believe that tomorrow will indeed be better. That resilience deserves an applause, and more importantly, it deserves a government worth it. Our Constitution protects hardworking South Africans against the abuse of power. It protects the poor from being ignored, minorities from being scapegoated, and majorities from being manipulated, and every citizen from the arrogance of those who believe that public office is a private bank account. It protects us from old school politics of racial oppression, but it must also protect us from new school and new politics of racial obsession. We cannot heal the scars left by our past by using the same tools used to inflict them. 30 years into democracy, South Africa cannot afford parties that trade in division, resentment, and permanent racial mobilization. We cannot build a united country if every problem is reduced to race, and every citizen is first measured by race before being seen as a human being. Non-racialism isn't a slogan. It is a founding constitutional value. It is one of the greatest achievements of our democratic dispensation, and it must be defended. South Africans belong to all who live in it. It's deeply troubling that some political actors openly flirt with scrapping and weakening the Constitution. Some speak of sovereignty of Parliament as if its unchecked political power is freedom. Let me tell you, it is not. Unchecked power is exactly what the Constitution was designed to prevent. A parliament without constitutional limits can quickly become a place where rights depend on the mood of the politician. South Africa has lived this nightmare before, and we dare not dress it up in new slogans and then call it a revolution. The Democratic Alliance stands here with a clear view. We will not chant the xenophobic populism. We say the rule of law must be defended. We will not elicit reckless land grabs that destroy investment, food security, and jobs. We uphold the right to private property. We will not mislead South Africans with empowerment policies that sound so noble in speeches, but too often enrich only the connected few while millions remain excluded. We celebrate equality. Redress is necessary, opportunity is necessary, but real empowerment must reach the child in the township school, the unemployed graduate, the small business owner, the farmer and the farm worker, the informal trader and the family surviving through honesty and hard work. Freedom, fairness, and opportunity, as well as diversity, are the practical foundations of a constitutional democracy that works for everyone. A constitution that protects the rights must be matched by a state that actually delivers justice. SAPS must be able to investigate without political interference, prosecutors must be able to prosecute without fear, favor, or prejudice, and courts must remain independent. Very importantly, Parliament must conduct oversight with a backbone. Government departments must serve the citizens and not the factions. Public money must be billed South Africa and not buy fancy cars and multi-million rand private mansions. So let us today celebrate the Constitution, but let us commit to defending it first. Let us applaud the spirit of the people who carry the hope of a better tomorrow with all resilience and strength. 30 years later, the Constitution remains a shield for people and a warning to the powerful. It does not belong to politicians, corrupt officials, criminals, disgraced judges, and all parties. It belongs to us, the people of South Africa, and the best way to honor this is to ensure that every child, every worker, every family, every community can feel its promise in real life. That is the work before us. That is the responsibility we accept, and that is the South Africa the Democratic Alliance is fighting for. I thank you.
Honorable Nwala.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable members, 30 years ago, the doors of this institution were thrown open to reflect, for the very first time, the true will and diversity of the South African people. We gather here today not merely to celebrate the passing of 3 decades, but to measure how far we have marched on the long road to complete emancipation. As we reflect on this 30th anniversary of our democratic parliament, we must ask ourselves a fundamental question. What is this true purpose of this legislature? It is not to serve as a house of endless debate and bureaucratic compliance. It is to serve as the engine room for social justice, transformation, and dignity for every single South African. The Bill of Rights and the promise to socio-economic dignity. Honorable members, our democracy is anchored by one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. As someone who privileges the daily work of overseeing our justice and constitutional frameworks, I'm continuously reminded that our Bill of Rights is not a passive document. It is an active covenant. Unlike older democracies that focused solely on civil and political rights, our Constitution made a bold revolutionary promise. It explicitly enshrined socio-economic rights as justiciable, fundamental human rights. Our founding mothers and fathers knew that political freedom without economic dignity is a hollow shell. They understood that the right to vote means very little if it is exercised on an empty stomach, or if a citizen lacks a roof over their head. Over the past 30 years, Parliament has passed transformative legislation to give these rights a teeth. However, as we celebrate this milestone, we must frankly admit that the gap between constitutional promise and material reality remains too wide for millions of our people. Our task for the next 30 years is to close that gap with urgency. Chief among these socio-economic rights is Section 21 of the Constitution, the right to basic education. Education remains the ultimate equalizer and the most potent weapon we have to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. Through our oversight and budgetary allocations, Parliament has consistently prioritized our schools, but quality basic education is a complex ecosystem that requires 3 non-negotiable pillars: empowered and accountable teachers. We must continue to invest in teachers' training, professional development, and support system to ensure our educators are equipped for a changing world. Timely delivery of learning materials. No child can learn in the dark. We must completely eradicate bureaucratic delays so that textbooks, stationery, and digital learning tools are on desk on day 1 of the school calendar. Safe and dignified infrastructure. Let us be unequivocal. In a democratic South Africa, no child should ever lose their life on dignity to a peddler tree. Parliament must hold implementing departments strictly accountable to ensure safe infrastructure, modern classrooms, and secure environments for our children. House Chairperson, human dignity is also deeply tied to the living conditions of our communities. Section 27 of the Constitution guarantees access to healthcare services, sufficient food, and clean water. We must accelerate our efforts to build a healthcare system where quality of care is determined by medical need, not by depth of citizens' pocket. Our oversight over public healthcare facilities must be relentless, ensuring that clinics have medicines, hospitals have staff, and patients are treated with absolute empathy. Furthermore, Chairperson, we cannot speak of health without addressing the structural determinants of health: clean running water, and proper sanitation. Local government delivery failures in a water distribution are a direct threat to constitutional rights. This Parliament must use its teeth to hold local government accountable for failing infrastructure. Coupled with water is the growing crisis of food security. In a country with our agricultural potential, no child should go to bed hungry. We must protect vulnerable households through active agricultural support and economic interventions that keep basic food baskets affordable. Where the economy fails to provide immediate relief, the democratic state must step in as a shield. Our social security system is one of the proudest achievements of our 30-year democratic journey. It is a vital lifeline that keeps millions of families above the line of absolute destitution. We must guard and strengthen our social assistance program for our children to ensure that they receive the nutritional and developmental support needed in their formative years. For our older persons, our pioneers who built this country under the harshest conditions deserve to age with comfort, security, and utmost respect. For persons with disabilities, we must move beyond more financial grants towards building an inclusive society that removes physical and economic barriers, allowing everyone to participate fully in public life. Our social grants are not charity. They are a constitutional right and an investment in human capability. Honorable members, as I draw to a close, let us remember how this Parliament came to be. It was born out of the power of the vote. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires active, continuous participation. We're currently moving towards the upcoming local government elections. This is where the rubber meets the road. Local government is the sphere of state closest to the people. It is where water pipes are fixed, where streets are lit, and where local economies are stimulated. If you want to see socio-economic rights, I have spoken about today, fully realize we need capable, accountable local government, and that
begins with the ballot. I want to issue a clarion call from this podium to all South Africans, particularly young people. Register to vote. 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 Do not surrender your power to silence. Registering to vote is your way of holding us accountable. It is your way of telling this parliament what your priorities are. It is the most powerful tool you possess to shape the next 30 years of our democratic story. Let us honor the legacy of those who fought for this parliament by keeping our democracy vibrant, active, and deeply rooted in the service of our people. And for the first time, Honorable Chair, I agree fully with Honorable Tape that this constitution does give a reward to criminals. And that reward is basically a prison cell. That's why today, Honorable Hunevart, Honorable Chalinchal, and Honorable Romolobe will attest that our prison cells are overcrowded. They are overcrowded because the work of the state is actually decisive on ensuring that anyone and everyone is brought to book any day of the time. Honorable Mokaye, we can, at your nearest available convenience, provide you with the statistics of the GBV perpetrators that are lingering in jail today, because the work of this government has ensured that GBV perpetrators belong to jail and they must be brought to jail with a speed. But this does not mean that that work is free of challenges. We do have those challenges, that one of them or some of them we have mentioned in this podium, but the work of government in confronting GBVF is actually in the upward mobility. I thank you, Chairperson.
That concludes the speakers list and the business of the day. Honorable members are requested to remain in their chairs whilst their processions leave the House. The joint sitting is adjourned.
Le voti lesela sayidinga.